The sound comes before the shouting. Before the steel doors slam. Before the officers raise their voices. It's a hum. A low, mechanical vibration that never fully disappears, as if the ground itself is alive. According to correctional staff interviewed in oversight hearings, it's the sound you stop noticing only after it's already settled into your bones. Fluorescent lights. Ventilation systems. Electrical wiring buried deep inside concrete walls that were never meant to hold this many people for this long. On one coast, that sound rises from an island in New York City's East River. On the other, it echoes across fog-covered water in Northern California. 2 prisons. 2 histories. 1 shared reputation. According to decades of news reports, court filings, and federal oversight reviews, Rikers Island and San Quentin State Prison have both been described using the same word by people who lived or worked inside them: feared. Not feared because of a single riot. Not feared because of one notorious inmate. Feared because of what happens when systems break slowly, over years, in full view of the public. Rikers Island was never supposed to become what it is today. According to New York City municipal records, it began as a temporary solution in the 1930s, an island jail meant to relieve overcrowding in Manhattan. Temporary buildings. Temporary policies. Temporary fixes. But as population pressures increased and political decisions stalled, temporary became permanent. Over time, landfill expanded the island from less than 100 acres to more than 400. According to city planning documents, layers of ash, debris, and waste formed the foundation. Investigators later noted the symbolism was hard to ignore, a jail system literally built on unstable ground. San Quentin's origin story is older, heavier. Built in the 1850s, it predates California's railroads, its major cities, even much of its legal framework. According to state archives, San Quentin housed everyone from low-level offenders to death row inmates. It became the site of executions, riots, and some of the most controversial moments in California's criminal justice history. 2 institutions separated by thousands of miles. One defined by chaos. The other by rigid control. Yet both produced the same outcome: fear. According to Federal Monitor reports and investigative journalism, fear inside these prisons isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's procedural. Sometimes it's knowing that help may not arrive quickly if something goes wrong. On a winter morning in New York, a Department of Correction bus crawls across the narrow bridge connecting Queens to Rikers Island. Inside sits a young detainee we'll call Marcus H., a composite name used for privacy. He hasn't been convicted of anything. Like most people held at Rikers, according to city data, he's awaiting trial. He watches the city disappear behind him. According to interviews published by public defenders and advocacy groups, many detainees describe the same sensation when crossing that bridge, a feeling that something has shifted, even before the gates come into view. Not fear exactly. Something colder. Final. At intake, the process is fast and mechanical. Belongings logged. Questions asked. Medical screening conducted at speed. According to public health audits, intake staff often work under extreme pressure, processing hundreds of people per shift. Marcus notices the nurse barely looks up when she asks the questions. He answers quickly. The line behind him keeps moving. Down the corridor, a sudden shout echoes. Something heavy hits concrete. Officers don't react. According to multiple testimonies cited in oversight hearings, this normalization is one of the most unsettling aspects of Rikers. The noise blends into the hum. Across the country, fog drifts in from San Francisco Bay as evening settles over San Quentin. Another man, we'll call him Daniel R., also a composite, stands at the threshold of a prison that has been feared for more than a century. According to former inmates interviewed by journalists, the first sight of San Quentin's cell blocks often triggers vertigo. Steel stacked on steel. Rows that seem to climb endlessly upward. The gates close behind him with a sound that lingers. According to state correctional reports, San Quentin's architecture reflects a 19th century philosophy: isolate, contain, control. But decades of overcrowding strained that design. Court filings from the early 2000s described conditions that exceeded intended capacity, creating tension that never fully dissipated. What both men feel, though neither has the language for it yet, is uncertainty. At Rikers, that uncertainty comes from unpredictability. According to city council testimony, staffing shortages, blind spots in facility design, and rapid population turnover created conditions where routine interactions could escalate without warning. At San Quentin, uncertainty is quieter but heavier. According to public records, long lockdowns, rigid schedules, and historical divisions within the population created an atmosphere where one misstep could have lasting consequences. The first night is always the longest. Marcus lies on a thin mattress in a dormitory filled with strangers. The lights never fully dim. According to mental health experts who testified before city oversight bodies, sleep deprivation is common in chaotic jail environments. It erodes judgment, sharpens tempers, alters perception. Marcus keeps his eyes open, listening. Daniel sits on his bunk during count. Officers pass with flashlights. Count again. And again. According to former inmates, some nights feel endless, not because anything is happening, but because something could. This is how fear takes shape, not as a single moment, but as an accumulation. According to watchdog reports, Rikers Island struggled for decades with issues that went beyond overcrowding. Facility layout created blind corners. Maintenance failures left doors and cameras malfunctioning. Response times during emergencies were sometimes measured in minutes that felt far longer. San Quentin faced its undocumented crises. Aging infrastructure. Overcrowded housing units. Health emergencies. According to court records, California's prison system was once ruled unconstitutionally overcrowded, forcing sweeping reforms. Yet both prisons continued operating, absorbing crisis after crisis like stone walls weathering storms. Marcus begins to notice the informal rules of his dorm. Who controls the phones? Where people sit? According to investigative reporting, such hierarchies often emerge in environments where supervision is stretched thin. Silence doesn't protect you. It only delays attention. Daniel learns the geography of San Quentin's yard. Invisible boundaries enforced not by posted signs, but by custom. According to former inmates, crossing the wrong line, even unintentionally, can carry consequences. Neither man has witnessed violence yet, but both feel its presence. Experts have described feared prisons as places where uncertainty becomes currency. You don't need constant chaos to create fear. You need inconsistency, delays, gaps in communication, systems that fail just often enough to be unpredictable. And that's the truth documented again and again in public records. Rikers Island didn't become infamous because of one incident. San Quentin didn't earn its reputation overnight. They became feared because failure was allowed to accumulate. As night settles over both institutions, the hum continues. Ventilation, electricity, concrete breathing under pressure. Two men lie awake on opposite coasts, inside systems far older and heavier than they are. And neither knows yet that this is only the beginning. The first real lesson inside a feared prison is that fear is not loud. It does not announce itself with alarms or shouting. It settles in quietly, through routine, repetition, and the understanding that nothing here exists to protect you, only to contain you. At Rikers Island, that realization often arrives within days. At San Quentin, it arrives almost immediately. At Rikers, mornings begin before the sun fully rises over the East River. The lights never truly turn off, but they brighten just enough to remind everyone that another cycle has started. According to city oversight reports and testimony from former detainees, this artificial rhythm erodes any sense of time. Days blur. Nights stretch. People stop marking hours and begin measuring survival in moments. The dorm units are large, crowded spaces, dozens of men sleeping in rows, separated by little more than arm's length and invisible rules. There are no doors to shut out tension. Conversations travel. Arguments echo. Every movement is observed not just by officers, but by other detainees constantly assessing one another. According to investigative reporting by multiple news organizations, these open dormitory layouts have long been cited as a contributing factor to violence, intimidation, and the formation of informal power structures. What happens inside these dorms is rarely written down in official logs. It exists in glances, gestures, and patterns. Who controls the phones? Who decides who gets the lower bunk? Who speaks loudly and who stays silent? According to public defender interviews and detainee affidavits, these hierarchies are often enforced without overt threats. Most of the time, a look is enough. For people held at Rikers awaiting trial, many legally presumed innocent, the shock is profound. Court filings and watchdog reports have repeatedly noted that detainees can spend weeks, months, even years inside the facility without a conviction, navigating an environment shaped by instability and overcrowding. The legal process moves slowly. Life inside moves too fast. Across the country, San Quentin operates under a different logic, but the weight is just as heavy. Built in the 19th century, its architecture reflects an era when incarceration was meant to be absolute. Thick stone walls. Steel bars. Narrow tiers stacked high, creating a vertical maze where sound travels upward and never quite disappears. According to California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation records, San Quentin has housed inmates of nearly every security classification over its long history, often simultaneously. This mixing, combined with chronic overcrowding documented in federal court rulings, created conditions where tension was always present, even during periods without overt violence. In San Quentin's older cell blocks, movement is slower, more deliberate. Doors open and close with mechanical finality. Counts happen repeatedly, sometimes several times a day. According to former inmates who later spoke to journalists, the repetition becomes psychological pressure. You are constantly reminded that you are being seen, counted, tracked, but rarely understood. What both prisons share is unpredictability. At Rikers, unpredictability comes from constant turnover. Thousands of people move in and out every week. Alliances form and dissolve overnight. A conflict that didn't exist yesterday can dominate an entire housing unit by morning. Oversight reports have noted that this rapid churn makes meaningful intervention difficult, even for experienced staff. At San Quentin, unpredictability comes from history. Decades of racial, gang, and geographic divisions shape how people move and interact. According to publicly available court records and investigative journalism, certain areas of the yard and housing units developed informal boundaries enforced by inmates themselves. Crossing those lines, intentionally or not, can have consequences. The psychological toll of these environments has been extensively documented. Mental health experts have testified before city councils and federal courts about the effects of prolonged exposure to noise, crowding, and constant vigilance. Sleep deprivation. Heightened anxiety. Emotional numbness. In both facilities, these symptoms appear again and again in medical records and litigation. At Rikers, medical care has been a recurring point of scrutiny. Federal monitors and city inspectors have reported delays in response times, staffing shortages, and systemic failures that left detainees waiting for treatment during emergencies. Each incident generated paperwork. Each report added to a growing archive of warnings. San Quentin has faced similar challenges, particularly during periods of overcrowding. According to state investigative findings, the strain on medical infrastructure became especially visible during public health crises, when limited space and aging ventilation systems exacerbated risk. These issues were not hidden. They were documented, debated, and, in many cases, unresolved. What makes these prisons feared is not just violence, but the sense of exposure. At Rikers, there is nowhere to retreat. At San Quentin, there is nowhere to forget where you are. According to former inmates interviewed years after release, both environments create a heightened awareness that never fully fades. Even outside, they said, crowds feel different. Noise feels sharper. Silence feels dangerous. Inside, people adapt in different ways. Some become hyper-alert, scanning constantly for threat. Others withdraw, minimizing interaction. Some attempt to build routines, exercise, reading, writing letters, small anchors in an unstable world. According to correctional psychologists cited in academic studies, these coping strategies can mean the difference between emotional survival and collapse. Yet adaptation has limits. The system itself often undermines stability. At Rikers, lockdowns can occur with little warning. Meals delayed. Programs cancelled. Entire housing units confined for hours or days due to staffing shortages or incidents elsewhere on the island. According to court filings, such disruptions contribute to frustration and escalation rather than control. At San Quentin, lockdowns carry a different weight. When movement stops, it stops completely. Silence fills the tiers. According to former inmates, those hours feel longer than days. You wait without explanation, knowing only that something has gone wrong somewhere in the institution. The moment a prison earns its reputation, it stops needing violence to enforce fear. The fear arrives ahead of it. At Rikers Island, that fear moves faster than paperwork, faster than radios, faster than official announcements. It travels through whispers, glances, sudden silences, and the way people stop asking questions when certain names are spoken. By the time Marcus wakes on what will later be remembered as a turning point, the island already feels different. Not louder. Not chaotic. Quieter. And in places like Rikers, quiet is never calm. It's preparation. According to oversight reports and testimony later reviewed by city monitors, periods of escalation inside Rikers often begin with subtle disruptions. A housing unit closed without explanation. An unexpected staff reassignment. A delayed movement schedule. The system rarely announces what's coming. It tightens first. Then it breaks. Marcus notices it immediately. The officer booth is staffed earlier than usual. 2 officers instead of 1. Both alert. One keeps a hand near her radio even when no one is speaking. The dorm lights hum with that familiar blue-white glare that never fully dims, but the men inside don't move the same way. Conversations stay low. Arguments don't erupt. People are watching each other too closely. Someone mutters that a fight broke out overnight in another building. Someone else says it wasn't a fight, it was retaliation. According to public incident logs, such rumors are rarely baseless. They are fragments of truth rearranged by fear. Marcus stays on his bunk. He's learned that survival here depends less on strength and more on timing. When to speak. When to look away. When to disappear into the background. Across the country, San Quentin is also holding its breath. Daniel senses it during morning count. Officers move slower, more deliberate. Faces are scanned longer. Flashlights linger on cell interiors even though nothing appears out of place. According to state correctional procedures, heightened scrutiny during count often follows intelligence alerts or unresolved incidents elsewhere in the facility. Daniel stands at his cell door, hands visible, posture neutral. He's learned that curiosity attracts attention. Attention attracts consequences. San Quentin's architecture amplifies tension in ways modern facilities don't. The cell blocks stack vertically, metal tiers rising like scaffolding into dim light. Sound travels upward and sideways. A cough in one cell echoes 3 tiers above. A whispered argument becomes public knowledge within minutes. Daniel hears it before he understands it. A sudden metallic bang somewhere down the tier. Then voices. Officers calling commands. The sound of running boots. The unit goes on hold. According to publicly available incident summaries, holds like this are used to freeze movement while staff assess risk. Inmates are secured in place. Doors remain locked. No explanation is given. The uncertainty does the work. Minutes stretch. Then half an hour. The silence becomes heavy enough to press against the chest. Back at Rikers, the tension breaks in the one place it almost always does. The Chow Hall. According to multiple investigative reports, the Chow Hall at Rikers Island has long been one of the most dangerous spaces in the complex. Overcrowded. Poor sightlines. Inconsistent supervision due to staffing shortages. Large groups moving at once. Trays, utensils, chairs, everything becomes a potential weapon. Marcus enters the hall with his dorm, moving slowly, eyes scanning without staring. He smells overcooked food and disinfectant. The noise level is already high, but there's an edge to it. A frequency beneath the sound. He sees him immediately. The new transfer. Larger than most. Tattoos visible even under the uniform. Relaxed posture. Confident. According to detainee accounts gathered in later investigations, transfers between housing units often trigger conflict when existing hierarchies are disrupted. The new arrival sits where he shouldn't. It's not posted. There are no signs. But everyone knows. Seating isn't random. It's negotiated territory. A man from another group approaches. He doesn't shout. He doesn't threaten. He says one word. Move. The new transfer smiles. That smile, according to former officers interviewed by journalists, is often the moment things become irreversible. It signals defiance. Or dominance. Or both. Marcus feels it before it happens. The room tightens. Conversations stop mid-sentence. Chairs scrape the floor as men reposition instinctively. Then a tray slams onto a table. The first punch is almost invisible in the chaos. A blur of movement. A shoulder dipping. A fist connecting. The chow hall explodes. According to incident reports later reviewed by city monitors, fights in the chow hall spread faster than officers can physically reach them. Too many bodies. Too many angles. Commands drown in noise. Marcus backs away, pressing himself against the wall. He keeps his hands visible. He watches men surge forward and others retreat. Chairs lift. Someone slips on spilled food. Another man goes down hard and doesn't get back up. Officers rush in. One uses a shield to separate bodies. Another grabs a detainee and pulls him backward. Radios crackle with urgent calls for backup. According to union testimony and public records, delayed response times during peak incidents have been a persistent problem at Rikers due to chronic understaffing. Backup arrives, but the damage is done. The new transfer is dragged out in restraints, still grinning despite a cut above his eye. Another man is taken out on a stretcher. The hall is shut down. The doors are locked down. Marcus walks back with his unit, heart pounding, adrenaline still buzzing through his hands. He knows what comes next. Investigations. Segregation. Retaliation. Nothing ends cleanly here. At San Quentin, the escalation unfolds differently. Slower. More controlled. But just as dangerous. The unit remains on hold for nearly 2 hours. When movement finally resumes, it's modified. Smaller groups. More officers. Radios constantly active. Daniel sees 2 inmates escorted past the tier in restraints. One limps. The other refuses to look at anyone. According to state incident logs, such escorts often follow targeted assaults or intelligence discoveries involving contraband or informants. Whispers spread immediately. Someone talked. No, someone got set up. Doesn't matter. Someone's next. Daniel doesn't repeat the rumors. He knows better. In San Quentin, information is currency, but it's also a liability. During showers, he overhears a conversation he wasn't meant to hear. 2 men speaking quietly, clipped, urgent. They found something in his cell. That's not what this is about. Daniel keeps his head down. He understands enough to know that perception matters more than truth. According to decades of reporting on prison dynamics, suspicion alone can trigger retaliation. That night, both prisons locked down harder. At Rikers, Marcus lies on his bunk as officers patrol more frequently than usual. Flashlights sweep the dorm. Radios chirp constantly. Men pace. Others stare at nothing. No one sleeps deeply. According to mental health experts cited in city oversight hearings, prolonged exposure to such environments leads to hypervigilance, anxiety, and emotional exhaustion. Marcus feels it settling into his bones. At San Quentin, Daniel sits on his bunk long after lights out. The block is quiet, but it's the wrong kind of quiet. Someone whispers prayers. Someone else laughs too loudly, then stops. Daniel thinks about the man who was attacked. About the men escorted away. About how quickly order can tilt into chaos. And then, almost imperceptibly, the institutions begin to adjust. At Rikers, classification officers arrive the next morning with clipboards. Names are called. Men are pulled aside. Some are moved without explanation. According to public records, such reshuffling is often intended to prevent retaliation but can just as easily inflame it. Marcus watches as 2 men from his dorm are transferred out. One looks relieved. The other furious. At San Quentin, classification reviews begin as well. Officers stop at cell doors, speaking quietly. Notes are taken. Files are updated. According to state policy, classification reviews following incidents can result in transfers, segregation, or heightened monitoring. Daniel feels the pressure building again. The machine is recalibrating. Sometimes recalibration stabilizes the system. Sometimes it overloads it. Experts in correctional management have noted that prisons rarely collapse from a single incident. They fracture from accumulation, from unresolved tensions, from systems stretched beyond design limits. Both Rikers Island and San Quentin are operating in that space now. Marcus learns later, through whispers and fragments of overheard conversations, that the Chow Hall fight was not isolated. According to subsequent reporting, similar altercations occurred in other buildings within days.